but perhaps you don't know how to apply it. And perhaps you don't know how to evaluate, analyze, critically evaluate and analyze, and then come to your own conclusion. So from my teaching experience as well, what I've noticed is we start with science inquiry, a lot of questioning, come up with a question, then devise your own experiment. You experiment. Before you experiment, you come up with your hypothesis. Then you collect data. Once you've collected data, you've got to analyze it. From the analysis of the data, you come to your own conclusion. Now, your conclusion is based on evidence because you've collected data. So that is critical analysis. And then evaluation, because you've come to a judgment based on the data that you've collected. And there's a lot of emphasis on the scientific process. I'm not sure whether we teach the scientific process here correctly or whether we teach at all. Because ultimately, when you go and study science at a higher level, when you go to university, it is all based on research, based on experimenting. Now, if you don't learn the skills in junior years, if your base is not strong in the junior years, all of a sudden you're exposed to a lot of research, a lot of scientific skills, which you are not capable of handling. After all, universities in the world are ranked on the basis of how many papers they've published, how many cutting-edge research they've done. Now, that has to start early on. We have to teach the scientific skills now. That's the main difference myself and my daughter have experienced. Now, how do we teach the scientific skills? How do we teach the inquiry process? So the ACARA, the curriculum body in Australia, has set 6 or 7 standards for us. So obviously when we are teaching and when we are assessing our students, we have to take care of those teaching standards. So we got to take care of literacy, numeracy, which is basic, and then intellectual understanding, which is the content, the concepts. After that, we've got to take care of personal and social capabilities. So we've got to prepare our students for the 21st century. They need to have those personal and social capabilities, which would include independent work, group work, goal setting, self-regulation, how to learn yourself, how to learn in a group, okay? And then failing an experiment, devising an experiment, doing an experiment, failing an experiment, therefore you develop resilience. So that's personal and social capabilities. Then ethical understanding. Whatever scientific skills you're learning, what are the implications on the society, on the environment? What are the cultural implications? We've got to take care of that when we are teaching and when we are devising our assessment tasks. And to do that, we have to incorporate ICT, computer technology, in almost every lesson and in most of our assessment tasks. When I say assessment, I'll come back to assessment later. So we have 3 or 4 assessments throughout the year. It could be an exam, it could be assessment, it could be a speech. So I'll come to assessment later. And the last teaching standard that the ACARA has set up for us is critical and creative thinking. Now, what I think is, I think our schools in India, when I was a student and when I was a teacher here, I think critical and creative thinking is not taught to the students in a proper way. They need to be, we need to equip them with the skills so that they can think creatively and then they can critically analyze the content. They know a lot. Our students are quite hardworking. Most of them have good memory because we know that we Indians like to work hard, you know. We instill in them the importance of education right from childhood. But our students I think, from my understanding, is they lack critical and creative thinking skills, which can definitely be fostered if we do the right things. Now, when I talk about the role of a teacher and when I compare it to how we teach here and how we teach in Australia, one main difference is in Australia, we are more like a facilitator. We like to say here as well that teachers are mere facilitators. We are not the epitome of knowledge. We surely never claim that we know everything. There is no need to know everything. Information is at our fingertips now. We can search information anytime of the day because we've got a mini computer in our hand. Everyone has got a mini computer in their hands nowadays, which is a mobile phone. All we need to teach our students is to how to find the right information, how to sift through the plethora of information that is out there. Not everything is right. This is the age of fake news. They need to be discerning enough to differentiate between what is the right information and what is the wrong information. I think that is the role of the teacher in the 21st century. And these are the skills that can be taught to the student. So when we incorporate ICT, information technology, into our lessons and assessments, we also teach them research skills. Because ultimately, when our students go to university, that is what they're going to do. They need to be able to do their own research. In our schools too, we have moved beyond books. We don't have books anymore. We are teaching them content which is drawn from the internet. We have a pool of resources. When they go to uni, they are going to read research papers. They are going to read multiple books. And then from those books, they need to find the right information, critically analyze it, and then create their own understanding, come to a conclusion, and only then they can create a new thing. So when we talk about cutting edge research, I think that's missing in India because we don't teach them the inquiry skills right from the beginning. Now, the other difference I've seen in teachers here, because I myself was a teacher here, is teacher is an authority figure here, a strict disciplinarian. Whereas in Australia, you are more friendly towards your teacher. You have to build a rapport with your teacher. As my daughter said, teachers are cool, a bit chilled out there, like they're quite chill. So if you have a good rapport with your teacher, then the teacher can question you, you can question the teacher, not in the sense of personal questioning, you can question about the content being taught. So there is an informal relationship between a student and a teacher there. It's not that formal compared to India. And so the discipline policy that is devised in schools is quite democratic. You discuss with the student body, and then you devise the student policy, you devise the discipline policy along with the students, which is acceptable to both you and the student. And most of the time, the disciplinary actions are natural consequences, based on natural consequences. What I mean by that is, you waste my time in class, you stay back at lunchtime because you've got to catch up on your work because you wasted your time in class. So instead of being belligerent, instead of putting them down, instead of being sarcastic, there's quite a democratic process to deal with the discipline issues in Australia. And plus there is a well-being policy, which every school has. And based on the well-being policy, most of the discipline issues can be dealt with because teachers would then be consistent. There is a support system in school. Teachers know what they have to do if students create discipline issues. There is, at least there is consistency. So that's how discipline issues can be dealt with. Now, when I say we follow the 6 or 7 teaching standards set by the Curriculum Authority in Australia, We do that for our teaching as well as for assessing. Now, when I say teaching, um, rote learning is very much discouraged in Australia. Now, I think that would be another stark difference between how we teach here and how things are taught in Australia. There's a lot of emphasis on memorizing here, recall of facts, understanding of facts, and recalling of those facts, which is important, but we've got to move beyond that. So when I say we teach them critical and creative thinking, so when we are teaching, we emphasize on recall on facts, understanding of facts, but we need to move beyond that. So what do we do for that? So after understanding, we've got to then analyze whatever we've learned. So for that, we ask them to compare, contrast, interpret whatever information they've got. And after they've analyzed, then they have to evaluate and justify. So they've got to come up with their own opinion. Once they come up with their own opinion, they've got to justify that because they've done the analysis, therefore they can justify the facts based on that analysis. So that's called evaluation. So every lesson would have some content on evaluation. And once you've evaluated the facts, what you can then do is you come to your own conclusion. So that is critical thinking. Critical thinking is involved there. Um, so that is how it is fostered in the classroom. Now I can tell you how we do that. Um, every lesson has to be differentiated in Australia. When I say differentiated teaching practice, what I mean by that is we have to cater to the needs of individual students. Now, we've got a spectrum of students in our classroom. On one end of the spectrum, we may have highly gifted and talented students. On the other end of the spectrum, we may have those who have learning difficulties or those who have their literacy and numeracy standards below the national standard, which means they have got poor literacy and numeracy skills. And in between, you've got the mainstream students, okay? So we've got to cater to their needs. So every lesson has to be devised in a way where every child can access the learning. Now, how do we do that? So we follow the universal design principle, universal design in learning. So universal design in learning says that you devise a lesson which can be accessed by all kinds of students, whether they have high needs or low needs. It caters to their strengths, it challenges them as well, and it also caters to their interests. You've got to make the lesson interesting. So therefore, you will have questions which will ask them to recall information. And then you'll have questions on the same worksheet, which will then ask them to analyze. So you're taking them from lower level thinking skills to higher level thinking skills in the same worksheet. And then those who are capable of moving on from simple questions to higher order thinking questions, it is on the same worksheet, no one's stopping them. So they move on flawlessly from one part of the worksheet to another. For students who are struggling with literacy and numeracy, there will always be parts where they can match up or fill in the blanks or close passage or visual information where words are given, they just have to fill in information. So it caters universally. It caters to everyone's need, and we are supposed to do that for every lesson. So this is called differentiate. We have differentiated the lesson for every single person. Now, ICT is involved in lessons. We use Google Classrooms there. We put our lessons up on Google Classroom. A typical lesson would have a short video for visual learners. Not everyone is capable of sitting and listening to our lecture for 10, 15, 20 minutes. After all, our attention span for students of school-going age would be maximum 15 to 20 minutes. They can't sit and listen for more than that. They'll get fidgety. So either they'll be sitting there because of fear, because they'll get a thrashing at lunchtime, or they have to stay back at lunchtime, or things like that. Or they're simply switched off and they're not paying attention anymore. So we incorporate ICT into our lessons. Lessons are posted. There could be any other platform. There are multiple platforms like Edmodo. In our school, we use Google Classroom. Now we're using OneNote, Microsoft 365. So a typical lesson would have a short video to start the topic with, or it could be anything else of your liking. It could be a PowerPoint, because after all, you've got to cater to the lower level thinking skills, dissemination of information, learning of information. So that is I'm forgetting the word. That is basic understanding. So after understanding, then you'll have certain questions where they can analyze. So a small video in the lesson, a worksheet, group work, where they can work in small groups to synthesize their learning. So after you have delivered your PowerPoint, after you've delivered the content, you will ask the students to sit in a small group so that they can analyze the content. You will devise an activity where they will talk on the issues discussed in the lesson, and then they will analyze the content, come with a conclusion, justify your conclusion, critically analyze what you've learned today based on an activity. Now, I will show you a typical lesson later on. So that would be a typical lesson, and the worksheet that is posted on Google Classroom would be differentiated, which caters to the individual. It is a personalized worksheet which caters to the individual needs of students. So when we post lessons on Google Classroom, it is further level differentiating. What I mean by that is they have a choice. They have multiple activities in the lesson, so they have a choice, and they can do it at their own pace. They can do it in the classroom. If they don't finish it in the class, they can go home and do it. You set a time frame that this worksheet or this activity needs to be finished within, let's say, 3 days or before the next lesson. So they have choice, pace. They can do it at their own pace. Authenticity. You will make lessons which are interesting, which will relate to the real world scenario. You will find topics from current affairs, things that are relevant now. So for example, if you're teaching viruses, if you're teaching biology, you can talk about the pandemic. You see, if you're talking about energy, you can talk about solar cells and renewable, non-renewable, all those things. So every lesson has to be differentiated, cater to the individual needs of students. So variety of experiences is also needed. So ICT, obviously we incorporate. I think that is one of the things that's still coming up in India. Not every student brings their own device, whereas in Australia, it is expected that every student will bring their own device to school. It could be a laptop, Chromebook, iPad, whatever they want to bring, not phones. And then when I talk about ICT, the other question that arises is whether our students are capable of using ICT responsibly, because that's a big question. Are they getting distracted? Before ICT, they were getting distracted because they used to talk to other people, you know, they pull each other's legs. With ICT, you don't know what they're doing on the screen, whether they're playing games. So what our education system does there is there's lots of checks and balances. Most of the websites are banned, they can't access YouTube. There are limited things that they can access. Therefore, we don't have to deal with inappropriate content. They don't have access to inappropriate content at school, at least at school. We don't know what they're doing at home. That's parents' problem. So in that way, we are assured that they are doing the right thing, and they have a variety, a diverse experience in terms of technology, because there are multiple platforms. Now, we can't keep them away from technology, because ultimately when they go out in the real world, they have to work with technology. When they go to university, most of the things are online. They have got to research papers online. The books are online, digital copies. The world is moving away from paper books um, because paper books will limit the content. We've got huge amount of knowledge online. We've got to tap into that potential, but to ensure that our students are using technology wisely, we've got to have those checks and balances, and we've got to teach them responsible use of technology. We can't keep them away from technology. It's the white elephant. It's the elephant in the room. We've got to address the issue now. Um, so it also caters to visual learners when we provide them diverse experience. Some people learn by watching videos. It is easy for some people to learn when they watch videos or when they watch PowerPoints. It's a good medium to teach. It also caters to individual needs. They can pace their learning. We also follow something called a flipped classroom, where in higher classes, when the students are capable enough to manage their own learning, we record the videos of the content. Let's say we're teaching physics. So we will record ourselves teaching, whether you're writing stuff on paper, record that, post it online for them, post it on Google Classroom. It is their job to watch the video and learn the content before they come to class. So I'm not wasting my time teaching them the content, which is lower level learning, knowledge and understanding. When they come to class, they come up with questions. We solve questions in class. That is higher order learning, higher order thinking process. We are learning to analyze the problem. We are critically evaluating the problem. Perhaps we are coming up with our own opinion. We're justifying our conclusion. So those higher order teaching skills are being taken care of in the classroom rather than doing at home. What we do here is the opposite. We teach them in class, you do the work at home, you analyze, you conclude, you justify, and there are no teachers to help at home, right? When they have questions, they come back the next day. In that process, half of the motivation is lost. So flipped learning works most of the times, but not always. Depends on your class, depends on how motivated the kids are. Especially for students in year 11 and 12, because they have chosen the subject they want to study, physics, maths, chemistry, whatever. So it does work for those students, perhaps not in junior years. Or if the content is quite simple, maybe it can work in junior years as well. So in that way, we are taking care of the higher order thinking skills. We are teaching them creative skills, creative and critical analysis in class. So you know, when we teach, we go through the 3 stages of explicit teaching. We say guided practice. First we model, and then we guide them through the practice, and then we give them independent work. So the independent work is done in class so that they learn those higher order thinking skills. So that's an example of how we use ICT. And assessments. So once we have delivered our lessons, assessments again have to follow those 6 or strands set up by the ACARA, the Curriculum Authority. So those assessments also need to incorporate literacy, numeracy, social and personal capability, ICT, critical thinking, ethical understanding. We have a variety of assessments. There is no mandatory rule that you need to have these many assessments throughout the year. There might be a minimum number. We have to address scientific understanding and scientific skills in our assessment tasks. They need to have some sort of scientific understanding, and then they need to have certain scientific skills. When we say scientific skills, they learn to experiment right from the beginning, right from primary school. Scientific inquiry, scientific method is taught to them. So one of the tasks has to be a scientific experiment. One task could be a research assignment. Now it could be a group assignment. You've got to incorporate group assignment as a part of it, collaboration as well. So one could be a scientific experiment, one could be a research assignment where they've got to research online, find the right information, analyze, evaluate, critically analyze, and then come to a conclusion. One could be a collection of work throughout the term. So whatever they do in class, you break it down into achievable parts, and then you mark them as you go. It's a bit of like a formative task, which becomes a summative task at the end. So collection of work, which can be added up to become an assignment. So it could be group activity, it could be a collection of worksheets, all the things that they do in class. And one could be a proper exam at the end of the year or in the middle, where you are teaching them the exam skills. Because in Australia, we have one public exam at the end of year 12. There is no public exam at the end of year 10, board exams. There's one at the end of year 12, and we are preparing them for that. And it is still pen and paper exam. It's not an online exam, so they need to practice those skills as well. So in our assessments, again, we've got to incorporate all those critical and scientific thinking skills. So that's our assessment part. When I say scientific inquiry, because I said, as when they grow up and want to pursue higher education in science, they'll have to do their own research. So we have to prepare them for the research in schools. Now, in Australia, we have this top-down approach, backward mapping, as we call it. Whatever they do in university, we try to do something similar in schools. We have similar marking criteria, which we water down a little bit, we make it simple, and we try to implement those, we try to incorporate those in our assessment tasks so that when a child goes to university, they don't get a big shock. They're already used to those kind of assignments, those kind of research skills. Second thing we'd like to teach them is intellectual property right. You can't just pick information from the internet and claim that it is yours. You have to reference it properly. There's huge information out there, but you can't say कि ये मेरी जानकारी है, I have come to this conclusion. You have picked something from the internet. That is someone else's intellectual property. If you are not acknowledging that you have, if you're not referencing it properly, then essentially it's a theft. It's called, there's a big emphasis on plagiarism. If you have not acknowledged it, then essentially you have plagiarized it. You have stolen it from someone. It is their intellectual property. Therefore, we teach them right from the beginning how to reference, how to find the information, and then how to reference it, and how to reference it properly. Surely you can use all the information, but give proper credit to the person who's done the hard work. And therefore, they are well equipped in their research skills once they reach higher education, because after all, cutting edge research is what we want in our country or any country. And the number of research papers, because it is the number of papers they published. Why do they publish so many papers? Why do they do so much research? Because they have been equipped with the scientific skills right from the beginning. They have been taught those scientific inquiry skills in school. I think that's what we are striving for in India. I mean, we have all the knowledge here. We've got the right, we've got the basics. Teachers are revered here. You know, they are next to God here. Our students are quite hardworking. I think they just need the right skills. And once they get the right skills, I think they're gonna, you know, I mean, they're already beating the world in many fields, but majority of them would have a good standing when they study higher science or when they go abroad. So that's my understanding about teaching science in Australia. If you've got any questions, I'm ready to take questions, or do you want me to elaborate a little bit more on any issue, any topic? I'm more than happy to elaborate. If I had more time, I would have shown you in detail what a typical lesson looks like, because you know my talking here in front of you will perhaps explain a little bit, but when you see something concrete, when you see an example, it makes things much clearer. So I'm more than happy to take questions. I'm more than happy to elaborate on any of the subject matter that I've spoken to. Um, and if time permits, I can show some of my lessons online on Google Classroom, if that's okay. Yeah, yeah. Sorry? Yes. Okay, yeah. So do I take questions first or do I show a lesson?
You can, if you have any questions, you can pose those questions. Then she'll show you the lesson that she does there. If you have questions, आप questions थोड़ा सोच लीजिए तब तक वो lesson का एक बार
ठीक.
Can we have an insight over how you people teach languages?
Languages.
Because I have a language teacher, so
Yes,
I really
yes.
find it.
Look, I'm not an expert. I'm not a language teacher. My daughter would be an expert because she studied here as well as there.
Just an insight.
Yeah. Look, English is their first language. I guess it would be similar to how we teach Hindi here. My daughter always says that we never learn grammar, whereas we have a lot of emphasis on grammar here. Yes, I think it's the immersion method there because English is their first language. You speak, you are immersed in that language day in and day out. You're surrounded by that language day in and day out. Therefore, you intuitively know what is wrong and what is right. अब हिंदी में हम बोलेंगे गलत ग्रामर से बोलेंगे तो हमें तुरंत पता चल जाएगा, लेकिन हमको ये नहीं पता कि इस संज्ञा गलत है या सर्वनाम गलत है, वो मुझे नहीं पता, लेकिन मैं गलत बोलूँगी तो मुझे समझ आ जाएगा. तो इंग्लिश में भी वही है, अगर वो गलत बोलते हैं उनको समझ आ जाता है, ग्रामर उनको नहीं सिखाया जाता. They don't like formal teaching of grammar. So I think immersion method, like you speak a lot, you hear a lot, you're immersed in that language, therefore you learn it. Apart from that, I don't know how they teach English, but yes, I can find more information. Yes. I can find more resources for you, teaching resources, how they teach English. Yes, so that is English.
Can you elaborate a little bit about the discipline issue? You gave one example. Waste my time
In class? Okay. So we call it natural.
More than that, like some more examples.
Okay.
What kind of
So,
issues that you get?
sure. So the main discipline issues we face there is disengagement. Students they're resistant learners. They don't want to learn. Not all of them, some of them. They don't want to learn. They are bored. They don't find it interesting. They've got complex issues at home. They've got emotional issues to deal with. Therefore, they can't pay attention in class. There are multiple issues, complex issues. So now our job is to keep them in class for 1 hour, 10 minutes. That's how long our lessons are. And then we have to make the lesson interesting. Then we have to plan group activities. And then we have to engage them in those activities. Now, chances are there will be 1 or 2 students who are not interested in any of those things that are planned. So therefore, most of the time, there are 2 or 3 things that we face. We call them low level but high intensity behavior. It's low level, not very serious, out of seat, talking out of turn. They're not raising their hand to talk. They're just, when I'm talking, they're also talking. When another child is talking, they're not listening, they're talking. Talking out of turn, out of seat. They're moving from this chair to that chair, or they're standing up without reason. So that's disturbing other students, right? So we will have 3 or 4 rules, basic 3 or 4 rules in the classroom, which we will establish beforehand. I'm a teacher. At the beginning of the year, I will say these are my rules, which are based on the school rules. School has its own discipline policy. Based on that, these are my rules. So I will have 3 rules: safety, respect, and learn. If you're not safe in a science lab, you can't learn. So first thing is safety. In safety, you can't run around a science lab. You need to tie your hair. You have to have enclosed footwear, right? You have to listen to teacher's instruction. You can't stand without her instruction because it is not safe for you. It is not safe for another student. I, as a teacher, am responsible for the safety of these 20 students. Therefore, I will not allow you to do these things. So, number one is safety. Number two is respect. I will respect you. Therefore, I expect respect from you. Okay, so respect is mutual. It's not that I'm a teacher, I'm older than you, therefore I automatically command respect. No, you have to raise your hand to get permission. Therefore, that's following instruction is respectful behavior. So you set up the standard, what are respectful behavior? You don't have to say these are the respectful behavior. You ask from them, what do you think is respectful in a classroom? So they come up with a list. You have a contract with them. You have come up with these 10 rules. You said you will follow them because it is safe, it is respectful. Once you are safe, once you're respectful, you are ready to learn. You have come to school to learn. That is our basic purpose here. Once you're ready to learn, um, I have certain expectations in learning as well. You will do this amount of work in this. They are bound to those rules. They cannot move away from those rules. So that you make them devise the rules. So when we say natural consequences, you have wasted my time in class. Sometimes I put a timer in class. They're not listening to me, they're moving around. So I put a timer, I said, okay, you've spent my 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes, whatever. You haven't listened to my instructions. These 2 minutes is a waste of time for you as well as me. Your peers are here to learn. So therefore, you spend the time at lunchtime with me. You give me your time, I've given my time. So therefore, you come at lunchtime, spend the time with me. So we call it lunchtime detention, natural consequence. And they will come up with their own, consequences. They are clever enough to come up with their own consequences. You make them devise the rules, and once they devise the rule, they can't go back. So that's, obviously, this is a very simple example. Uh, so disengagement, once they are not doing their work in class, so every school will have its own discipline policy, well-being policy, devised with the help of the student body, as perhaps parent representatives as well, and the teachers come together, devise a policy. If you have a policy, then teachers have the school's support. Parents can't blame the teachers. School can't blame the teachers can't blame the school, that you're not supporting me. So therefore, there is no conflict, and everyone's consistent in their ideas. So if a student doesn't finish their work in a class, whatever was assigned to them, then again we say, if you don't want to do it here, come at lunchtime, do it at lunchtime. If you don't come, I will call home. So we normally tend to contact the parents right away so that they are also aware of what's happening in class. Normally, once you contact parents, the students fall into line. They know that, it has reached my parents. Normally, parents are supportive. So therefore, they'll talk to the students. Maybe a student has had a bad day or is tired, or they put a lot of emphasis on sports and extracurricular activity. So they may not have time to finish the work. Most of the time, students are tired. So they want to rest in class sometimes. So you talk to the parents. Parents are quite supportive. 1 or 2 lunchtime detentions is more than enough to put the students in place. If that also doesn't work, then you have a meeting with the parents to ask them how to support the student at school, or how can they be supported at home. And if there's a higher level discipline issue, let's say fights, aggression, violence, then there's a policy of suspension. Students are suspended for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. There's a maximum suspension of 20 days for violence, aggression, swearing towards the teacher, being abusive towards the teacher. That is maximum violation that can happen. Apart from that, most of the issues can be solved within the framework of the school discipline policy. Another issue, do you want me to talk about discipline issues? Yeah? Enough? I don't know about here. Another issue that we are facing in schools there is use of e-cigarettes, vaping in the toilets. E-cigarettes, vaping. Yes. Yes, so that's the current issue that we are facing. Because weights are illegal, therefore, if you are found in possession of an illegal substance, that also is immediate suspension. That kind of. So apart from that, I don't think there are. Students are reluctant learners because of a variety of issues. Australians don't place a big emphasis on formal learning because formal education doesn't guarantee social or economic class mobility. In India, it guarantees social mobility. Padhoge, likhoge, you'll get a good job. You know, you'll go move from, let's say, lower class to middle class, or middle class to upper class because you've got a good job. In other countries, formal education or going to university is not that important because even if you don't go to university, even if you go for vocational training, you are equally remunerated. You have an equal standing in society. Um, there's less class system. Australia is known for its egalitarian values, equality. People are more or less equal, and it's also known for its fair go. Like everyone has a chance, equal chance. Everyone gets equal opportunities. They value this thing. Doesn't matter whether you belong to, middle class, upper class, any class. People get similar opportunities, and that is valued. So everyone can have a fair go, egalitarian system. Formal education is not important for social mobility. Therefore, those who want to go to university will complete year 12. Those who don't want to go to university will not continue after year 10. They will do vocational training and they do equally well in the society. So it's not that higher education is valued. So that's the thing. So those who are really interested will pursue higher education. Those who are not will find their own ways and they're quite happy with their pathways. Whereas here, I think it is quite important for social mobility. Classroom? Okay, sure. All right, thank you. I'll try and show one of my lessons. If it works, if it doesn't, I'm not sure. I'll show you next time. Yeah. This way? This way? Okay, ये स्कूल की जीमेल है. Use another account. नहीं, I don't have access. No. ये मेरा वहाँ का number है. It's okay. I don't think I can access. I don't have my phone. Plus, I don't have. It's not active. Yeah. I can send a sample.
Fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions anybody wants to ask?
Yes.
Related to differential learning discipline. So just want to ideas how to implement this.
Okay. What subject do you teach? Biology. Um, I may have a couple of lessons, which perhaps I can send it to the school of differentiated teaching practice. Yeah. I can send it. If I had more time, I could have sat with you and gone through the process. But yes, so when we say, like, when you teach the students here, do you have students with disability? Classmate? No, not really. Okay. But even if we don't have students with diagnosed disabilities, there will always be students of diverse learning needs. Some have high needs, some are already gifted, whereas some are still struggling and, they may need some hand holding. So it is recommended that, we differentiate every lesson with a variety of activities in a variety of modes, like, pen and paper, online worksheet, those kind of things. Yeah, but I can send a sample lesson later. Sure. Sure. Yep. Sure. Yeah. Sorry?
Get this suspended for say 10 days or 15 days. What about the study?
Yes.
They are lacking in the study.
I know. Yes. Um, yeah, so we have to post lessons online and they have to complete the study at home, but they have to be removed from that environment. Sometimes it is internal suspension
Actually, the problem is they are serious.
because they don't like learning. Yes. Yes. No, we don't suspend them for disengagement. It is for extreme reasons like violence. When they have a big fight, violence and abuse. So they have to be separated from that environment for some time. Sometimes it is internal suspension. They sit in the library, they're not with the peers, they're not meant to interact, they have boundaries, they can't go into certain areas. You sit in the library, finish your lessons online. We'll provide them with a computer. If they are suspended and they are at home, then we will have to post lessons online or post a booklet. They have to complete those things at home, and we have to provide them in such a way that they can do it. It has to be simple enough so that they can do it. Yes, we can't take the learning away from them, but suspension is for extreme cases. It's not encouraged. In fact, it is being discouraged by the government because, as you said, they're already not engaged in learning, and suspension will make them more disengaged.
From sixth onward, you got a like primary.
Primary is up to year 6, 7th to 12.
12, they have to do that pen paper.
Exam. Yeah.
So how much emphasis is there on the written writing
Part of the
written work? Because here we have a lot of
emphasis on written work.
semesters.
Yes.
And every time the assessment is a written assessment here.
Yes.
So how much, what kind of different assessments can we use?
Yeah.
We can also practice here. How a child, because we tap the child after that assessment, this is where the child stands. But it's not the reality. Actually, we are not able to judge our children properly because of this kind of
Assessments. I understand. So we are mandated by the curriculum framework to provide different types of assessment tasks. As I said, maybe one assessment is a pen and paper exam. Other assessments are, as I said, research assessment. So when you're researching, you basically you're using computer to type your assessment task. Now, there are multiple tools online to check your grammar, to check your punctuation, and also to paraphrase for you. So they're allowed to use all those things because they're learning to use those things. So that is not pen and paper. So they're using technology to do the assessment. Another assessment could be a group, one has to be an experiment. So they do an experiment in class, they collect data. I'm talking about science. And they do in all subjects, like English, history, they have to do multimodal assessments, it's called. Um, they do an experiment, collect data, then analyze. So once an experiment, one could be a collection of work. They can make a poster, they can prepare a speech, they can prepare a PowerPoint presentation, they can even role play. I've seen in history and English when they're learning about, let's say, World War. So you prepare a speech in your own way. So I've seen students talking about World War from a general's perspective, from a soldier's perspective, from a prisoner of war's perspective. So that's their creativity. You present the information from any perspective. You might want to write a story from a prisoner of war's perspective. What happened in the Second World War during that particular battle? So that's history, even in English. Now, when they are doing those presentations, the teacher will ask them to dress up in the clothes of that era. So therefore, you get that feeling of, you've gone back in time. So there are many ways of assessments, and we do follow multimodal assessments. I think we need to move on from pen and paper exam. It is an important skill to learn, but it can be limited, and other types of assessments can be incorporated. Um, there's lots of role play in English, and we may think how to mark creativity can be a problem, but you can devise a marking criteria for all those creative and critical thinking skills. There are marking criteria which can be, marking criteria can be designed around those creative types of assessment tasks. So it doesn't need to be pen and paper. And especially in science, you have to have one experiment. And when we say experiment, students have to come up with an authentic question, like original question, which they have to investigate. Now, when I was talking to my daughter, she said, we learn about reliability and validity of data right from primary school and throughout high school. So when they go to university, then they're learning about other types of things. Now, she said meta-analysis, hierarchy of evidence, specificity of test, sensitivity of test. I don't know about those things, but apparently they do learn these things in university. But we start teaching them about reliability, validity, accuracy of collecting data and then analyzing right from high school, because experimenting scientific inquiry is a big part of teaching science in Australia, perhaps in the Western world. One grade to another. No student is held back, whatever grade they get, because they believe in social and emotional adjustment of the child is more important than academic achievement. They need to be with their peers. If they are with the children who are younger than them or older than them, they don't get the same experience that they should be getting. So no child is held back. We will support them in their learning. We will try to devise lessons at their level. Therefore, they are learning at the stage level. So whatever is meant to be learned in year 8, we will design experiences, assignments, lessons around those topics in a simple way as well as challenging way, so that both ends of the spectrum are getting those experiences. High achieving students as well as those who are struggling, those who need help, but they're not held back. There is a grading system, A to E. A is when people have extensive understanding of the topic. B would be thorough understanding. C would be basic understanding. D would be limited understanding. And E would be, I think, emerging understanding, something like that, getting to know. So generally we say if you're performing at a C level, then you are at the stage level. You know the basics. That is sufficient for you to go to the next grade. Even if you get a D or an A, you will still go to the next grade. But you still have gaps in your learning, which the teacher will try to address. Any more questions? All right. Thank you, one. It was nice interacting to you. And if I have more time next time, I would love to come and interact again. Thank you so much.